Welcome to the Excel Pod. Welcome to the UNTIED Podcast, where we unravel the knots of life with faith, wisdom, and encouragement, because together we're here to untie from tradition and embrace truth through powerful Bible teaching. My name is Garrett Bernithi. I'm one of the hosts of this show, along with my very good friend, Corey Sawyers, and we are bringing you finally, after a few weeks of not being able to record Season 3, Episode 2. So we're literally slowly making our way through this season, but we still are planning to get through everything and still have a great season in store for you as the listener or the viewer. And so we're glad to be able to do this. So we're glad to be back on here and get back to normal, if you will. So let's start it out the way we love to start it out, Corey. What's been cooking?
Well, if we teased that we were going to talk about the Psalms in this season. It took about 1,000 years to get all the Psalms completed, so it's appropriate for us to take a little time to, I guess, get this season going. But some may not know there's been some difficulties in your family, and certainly you've been in our thoughts and prayers, and we've been traveling a little bit, but it is good to be back. Yeah, we've been out to the Bear Valley lectureships last week. Got to see our middle son and his wife, Gordon and Lauren, and spent some time. Actually, what was cooking out there was Melody cooked for the entire student body. She made chicken and dressing and green beans and hash brown casserole and real sweet tea that they don't get usually out in Denver and rolls. And it was funny, too, how many are they would point at the chicken and dressing and they're like, what is this stuff? Can you hear me?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay. They're like, what is this stuff? And she says, it's what you eat at Thanksgiving. And they're like, no, we don't eat anything like this at Thanksgiving. Well, where are you from? I'm from Ohio. Oh, you eat stuffing, don't you? Well, there's a difference in stuffing and Southern cornbread dressing. And, they're licking their lips and saying, why have I never been told about this stuff? And you'll notice no one ever goes up north to try the food. It's it's something that you just don't see happening very often. So, but anyway,
right, yeah, lots and lots of good food down south. Well,
yeah,
gave him a little bit of taste of the good life down there in Tennessee, huh?
That's right. You know, about I don't know how long ago it was, 15 or 20 years ago, maybe. That I asked Melody, I said, how come, she asked what I wanted for supper, and I said, what I really want? She said, what? I said, dressing. How come we only eat that at Thanksgiving? And she said, I don't know. Melody makes hers in a crock pot, so it's not that.
Right.
I mean, there's stages. She has to make the cornbread and all that. But
right.
I said, is it too much trouble? She said, no, it's not really any trouble. So it's kind of gone in the rotation. We don't have it weekly, but we have it fairly often through the year that she'll make chicken and dressing. And, man, that was some cranberry sauce and some mashed potatoes and green beans. That's right. I mean, there's no sense in sweet potato pie. There's no sense in making that only a once a year occasion. So
yeah. Well, I think that we've talked about this before. I know we are starting to approach Thanksgiving, I guess. Deer season started today, so that's awesome. It is, officially the favorite time of year. Football's already been going, but now it's, officially
fall.
Yeah. I think I've told you this before. My family, that's my family. So my side of the family, not my wife or her family, but my side of the family, we do not like Thanksgiving food. We have always had, ribs, or we did steaks. We've done that several times. It's typically one of those. That's just where we are. None of us just, there used to be a place in Oklahoma City that had, they really did a good job of smoking turkey. And so we would get some of that and just kind of have, typical barbecue kind of stuff. And there's always some stuffing or something made, but very few people like it. Now, on my wife's side, very different. They've got to where they like to fry the turkey and all that, but, kind of the typical dressing and all that stuff over there. But yeah, I've never been a Thanksgiving person. So, I'll have to try if I'm ever able to try, y'all's dressing. I'll definitely do it, but
I'm biased, of course, but Melody makes, I always thought it was my Mamaw, but I never told this to Mamaw, but I think Melody had her topped, and her Mimi made really good dressing, but Melody's has surpassed them all on the dressing. And, but now I usually smoke a turkey. I never was a turkey fan I'd eat one little bite of turkey every year just to say I had turkey, until I got a deep fryer and started deep frying them, and I love them. And then I started smoking them. And, now when I smoke a turkey, I use 4 sticks of butter and 2 pounds of bacon. So I'm sure whatever healthy part of turkey that there is no longer healthy after I get done with it. But it's tender and juicy and flavorful. But
you can get it
usually
like that.
she just makes chicken and dressing. But anyway, do what now?
Well, if you can get it like that where it's good and tender, I think that's where the problem is with so many, especially with smoking turkey, they just dry it out, and so figuring that out is definitely the key. But there's some places around, man. The smoked turkey, and they'll do it in slices, just fantastic. Now, I do like a good turkey leg. Oh, yeah. The fair came around, and we had our, hydro here in Oklahoma. They have the longest standing free fair in Oklahoma. And there's a couple people that they will, few people, they'll smoke turkey legs, and man, they're good. They're fantastic. And, they're half the price of what you can get over at the state fair, which I wasn't able to make it over there, the state fair this year. Sometimes we try to go, and Chris and I was wanting to go just by ourselves, maybe during the day, but man, they're good. And then they roasted some corn on the cob, and had all kinds of good stuff to put on there. But turkey legs are definitely pretty good.
Well, I'm a dark meat guy anyway, so whether you're talking about chicken or turkey, I'd rather have the leg, the thigh. Thigh's my favorite part of either one. But yeah, when we go to Disney World, that's always something we want to get, is a turkey leg. And part of it is how good it is. Part of it is, I feel like a medieval king walking around with my turkey leg, peasants, get out of my way, whatever.
You cannot eat a turkey leg and like, I don't know, be proper. When you eat a turkey leg, it's just, you got to go
especially with a beard.
Yeah.
Especially with a beard. And you've got grease to sample for the next couple hours at least. You just kind of lick around. So.
You better have a roll of paper towels or something.
That's right.
If it's good, man,
Well, if you ever come to Martin, I've talked before about Blake's Barbecue, and Tyler has gotten to eat here, and he talked. Blake does Texas barbecue, Tennessee style, and so we've got brisket, and we've got ribs, and we've got pulled pork, and all that. But his turkey, and he just does the breast. He doesn't do the whole turkey. He just does the breast.
Yeah.
And that's the easiest part to dry out, is that white meat breast. Mm-hmm. But I'm telling you, it is phenomenal. I don't know how he does it exactly, but to just do the breast and get it that flavorful, that juicy, it's phenomenal. So they have what they call a Bubba Cole sandwich. Usually it's served on a brioche bun. I get it grilled cheese style on Texas toast, but it's got brisket and their house-made pimento cheese and the smoked turkey. And dude, It is larping. Your tongue will beat your brains out trying to get more of it in.
Oh, man. Larping. That's what it is. That's another thing. I'm not a fan of pimento cheese. But my grandmother loves it. Loves it. And so she'll put it on some crackers, and then her and her Diet Dr. Pepper, which I call that the imposter drink. You know, you can't have Diet, it's just Dr. Pepper, but that's what she likes. And she said, "Oh, I love it." And she does, man. She just eats it up. And but, I haven't tried it in a long time, so I probably shouldn't say I don't like it anymore, because my taste buds have changed so much as I have grown older. A lot of the stuff that I could not stand when I was younger, I love now. And so, I probably should try it again, but
and jalapeno pimento cheese I really like.
Now that would probably
you can take a pack of Ritz crackers, or even just a bag of potato chips, and just dip that out, and man, it's good. That sweet and heat, I love sweet and heat.
Man, anything with jalapeno is just good. It's just good.
Yep.
I've rarely had anything that wasn't good with jalapeno in it.
You put enough cheese and jalapeno on the bumper of your car, it'll be good. So,
oh man, yeah, that's good stuff. That's good stuff. So, well, you said you went to the Bear Valley Bible Lectures, and I don't know that all of our listeners have known about the lectures. Maybe they have known about them, or known they exist, but maybe they have not been. So put a plug in and tell everybody about it real quick.
It's really good. In fact, you can go to I think the church side too, but for sure the Bible Institute side, Bear Valley Bible Institute's YouTube page, and all of the lessons from the auditorium will be there. I was the bitter end. I was the very last speaker on Sunday night. But there's other lectures in the fellowship room, the library, the chapel. That the audio of those will be later on Bear Valley's website at wetrainpreachers.com. But my wife Melody got to speak on Saturday afternoon, and there was a women's leg of that where they have several women's sessions. There's some youth sessions, and it's just a good weekend. Of course, great weather usually in the middle of September. Our anniversary is usually right in the middle of the lectureship, and so it's just a really special weekend. Always starts on Thursday night, ends on Sunday night, and just a good environment. They welcome people to come in early or stay late, and you can sit in on some of the classes that are going on if you'd like, or whatever. But it's just a really good weekend. We covered the first half of Matthew in this lectureship, and then next year it'll be 15 through 28 of Matthew, do the second half. And so lots of really good lessons. I wasn't able to even go out until Sunday because I had a wedding, but through the weekend, I was listening to them, the ones in the auditorium, and some just phenomenal lessons. And so anyway, I would encourage anybody to go, especially if you live in the South and you want a little. We had a little taste of fake fall and really wanted some cooler temperatures, and got to go out to Bear Valley and in Colorado, have a little bit of that. So, but that's good. I've only been able to be to one of those lectures, and it was great. And I'm hopeful to go again, maybe next year, but. I'm glad that you got to go out there and do that. And we'll make sure for all those who are tuning in, I'll put those in the show notes, link to the YouTube page and to the Bear Valley website, wetrainpreachers.com, where you can tune in to those. And I love that a lot of the different events, lectureships, polishing the pulpit, a lot of these different things that they're putting those lessons out there and in one way or another, so that people can tune into those year round. And so anytime we mention anything like last year, we looked at was it Linda Road up north? Mm-hmm. Yeah, we looked at that and we put some information about that. I'm sure that's probably coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Meridian, Idaho, and that's usually in about the third. It's usually the third weekend in October because Tennessee's playing Alabama that weekend. So
Yeah.
I'm not there this year, but they always have a really good lineup and really good topics that they cover as well. So
Yeah. So we'll try to share those from time to time. We've also talked about affirming the faith. We try to share different events that are going on, and of course we have to mention our event, Corey, the Excel Still More Bible Workshop. That's coming in January 21st through the 24th. We'll be at the Okana Resort and Convention Center in Oklahoma City. And so you can register now. In fact, we have several up until the 5th of October. So just a few days, the early bird registration is still open. So you can actually get a discounted price to book your registration, and we have discounted room rates of $129 per night, and that's at a resort. It's very nice. It's actually brand new, and you actually get there's some things that are included that for you if you would like to take advantage of those. You're right next door to downtown Oklahoma City, which has a lot of things too. So we're planning to have the evenings free, and so that'll be a Wednesday through Saturday, and we've got some great speakers that'll be there as well. We'll be putting more and more out there. If you haven't seen anything, like and follow our Facebook page. Sign up to receive our email updates every week at excelstillmore.net, and you can see those as well. But hop on there to the website and check that out. January 21st to the 24th, we'll be looking at Romans 9 through 16. And our beloved Corey Sawyers will be speaking there as well. We've got a good lineup this year, so I'm really excited about what's coming.
yeah, it'll be a good week. And we haven't done book recommendations, but those are two book recommendations we could make. Is the lectureship books from Bear Valley are available on their website that you can get, but then also that has all of the different lectures that take place. There's at least some connection. Mine's usually, by the time I turn in my manuscript in April and then I study it until September, my sermon usually looks very different from the manuscript that I turn in. But I tell them you get 2 lessons for the price of 1. But the other one, of course, is the books from the Excel workshop that have a breakdown of whatever book that year has covered, that has some good resources for preachers or teachers or just someone who's trying to study and learn more about a particular book, deep dive in them. And you can find those, of course, on the Excel website. So,
yeah. 2 really good series. I can't believe that we're on our 7th one. Seemed like just yesterday we were starting the first one. And so time has flown by and it's grown tremendously, and being at the new location, more centralized, a lot more to offer there. Very nice facilities, great pricing. In fact, what's crazy is that we were able to move from our previous location to this location, and for everyone who will attend, the price will drop. So, you can't beat that. As far as
you owe it to your brethren to come to help them save money.
That's right.
That's what we're saying.
That is right. That's right. So make sure and check that out. I'll put that in the show notes as well, to come to the Excel Still More Bible Workshop in January. That's 21st to the 24th. And we'll be pushing out some ads probably as well on these podcasts that we're shooting out. So all that is very good stuff, and looking forward to that. And Corey, I'm really glad that we can jump back on here and kind of get back in the groove of things. You mentioned that last few weeks for our family has been a little bit difficult. We lost my grandfather, who was meant a whole lot to us, and in the same week, my uncle had an accident. He broke his leg and had to have surgery. And the same week, we had another family member who was diagnosed as a diabetic. My little nephew, and there's just so many things that just boom, boom, boom. I told my grandmother yesterday, I said, I don't know if we could take it anymore. She said, well, we probably could have. We would have just dealt with it, and which she's probably right. But it was one thing after another, and kind of hard. But we have made it through, and mourned, and grown together even more, and so loss is never an easy thing, but it's so good to get back and talk with good folks like you, and to be able to talk about great things like the Psalms. So very thankful for that. So
yep.
Well,
yep. And Tamley, when you're going through things in life.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? We're about to get into a place that is all about that kind of stuff, helping to get through and to really think on those things and understand what really matters. And so, good stuff. Good stuff. Well, we are looking at Psalms 1 and 2. I can say Psalms in the plural because we are looking at 2. I know that we talked about that last episode, making sure we're going to be pretty stickler on if we're in one Psalm, it's not Psalms. So we're going to try to make sure, and then when we're preaching, we're going to make everything plural. So we're going to do the opposite and make sure and give everybody a hard time with that. But what we have entitled this episode is The Importance of the Word and the King. And so Psalms 1 and 2 really does have some really great stuff. And it really is. I love the illustration that Corey is what I heard from you, which are that these two Psalms are like the doors, a set of double doors. I just picture those Western double doors, like you'd be seeing a John Wayne movie, like in El Dorado. He goes, those doors that open up into, in that case, a saloon. But in our case, we're walking somewhere totally different. So maybe not the best illustration, but I think we get it.
Maybe we're going. Maybe the double doors of the church building. We should think of.
There we go. Yeah, up the steps into the church building. Make that a good thing. But these are the doors that open up to the rest of the Psalms, and I think that's a great illustration for that.
Well, the whole thought process there is, if you don't get these two right, if the whole purpose of the Psalms is, no matter what we're going through in life, this is going to bring us closer to God. The psalmist we talked about last episode, there's a reason David, the man after God's own heart, wrote as many as he did. There's a reason why, as far as we know, Saul didn't. Whatever we're going through, good or bad, we're going to draw closer to God. If we don't understand, if we don't value and appreciate and love the Word of God, that's Psalm 1. If we don't appreciate and love and value the anointed of God, that's Psalm 2, then we're never going to grow closer to God. Because in the days of David and the kingdom that most of these Psalms were written in, the anointed of God was God's representative that was supposed to lead God's people closer to Him. If you're not following the anointed of God, you're not going to get closer to God. For us, of course, that takes a greater meaning in the person of Jesus. And if we're not valuing the Word of God, if we don't value Jesus, we're never going to grow closer to Him. But I'm sure I want you to lead the discussion, and you'll tell a lot of things, the direction about which way you'd like us to go. But just to start with, and I think we may have talked about this a couple of weeks ago, we talked about this idea of blessed or whatever. It doesn't mean happy. That's kind of a shallow idea of it, but it really is the idea, and we looked at a few verses in Psalms that taught this, but it really means being approved of by God. Well, he begins verse 1 by saying, "Blessed is the man who doesn't do certain things, but instead his delight is in the law of the Lord." Well, then you go through Psalm 2, and he talks about the one that the Lord has anointed and put in his place. And at the very end of Psalm 2, in verse 12, it says, "Kiss the Son." Literally, metaphorically, that would be worship the Son. lest he be angry and you perish in the way, for his wrath is kindled quickly. Blessed are all who take refuge in him. So the God-approved one is not only the one who focuses on the Word of God. The God-approved one is the one who takes refuge in the anointed of God. Mm-hmm. And of course, that ultimately for us is Jesus. So these two, I think, belong together. And there's some other things we could talk about. Like, for example, we don't know. There's no title that tells us who wrote Psalm 1 and 2. The majority of Book 1 of the Psalms is written by David. Maybe these two are written by David, maybe not. But there's Acts chapter 4 and Acts chapter 13 tells us in the New Testament. We find out that they were written by David, or Psalm 2 was at least. But maybe they both were written by David, maybe they weren't. But it does seem like they belong together, as you've got to get, Denny would say, these are un-get-aroundable. If you're going to love God, you got to love His Word and you got to love His anointed.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, for Acts 2, for Psalm 2, that's a quote from Acts chapter 4 and verse 25 and Acts 13 and verse 33 that would reference David being able to write those psalms. I think that this is interesting here in Psalm chapter 1 and verse 1, that he gives a description or maybe even a definition of what the blessed man looks like. And really this is a huge, the idea of the blessed man opens up this spiritual reality that we have to really come to grips with, is that there is a way that God wants you to live and there's a way that God does not want you to live, and either one of those have an outcome. Well, the outcome of walking in a certain way is to be blessed by God, and the outcome on the other end is to not be blessed by God. And so it's a very simple thing. But notice here in chapter 1 in verse 1, or Psalm 1 in verse 1, blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, nor stand in the path of sinners, nor sit in the seat of scoffers. So he kind of gives this negative, the negative part of what the blessed man does not do. But then he says in verse 2, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law he meditates day and night. Now, I know that we're going to get into that a little bit more, but we could call that, the first definition, if you will, of what the blessed man looks like. But when we come down to Psalm 2 and we look in verse 12, it says, how blessed are all who take refuge in him. Now, that, again, is kind of a second definition that has, that right there is a sermon series. A huge sermon series right there. Blessed are those who take refuge in him. Now, what I think is really amazing is it looks like it's not the smallest word in here, but I think it might be one of the most important words. It's this term, all. And let's see, I'll just make that red. Blessed are those are all who take refuge in him. There's a lot that we could discuss with this. And from a current contextual standpoint and from an overall understanding of everything in regard to the teachings or the doctrine of the Bible itself. But this statement really does connect itself to so much. I mean, in Psalm 2, we're looking at, basically the anointed of God, who can be, in this context, can be anybody at this point. It would be directed toward Solomon. It would be directed toward David. It would be directed toward even Saul, or ultimately Rehoboam, who is God's anointed king. But ultimately, we know in Hebrews chapter 1 that Jesus is also called Son and is the anointed of God. And so for those who will submit to the anointed of God, those are going to be people who are taking refuge in him. And so there's multiple meanings here, kind of a dual meaning of that idea of the anointed son. But here, the word all can also have many meanings, because ultimately, everyone who takes refuge in God, everyone who submits to the authority of God, everyone who follows the will of God will be blessed. And that is a constant teaching in the Old Testament as well as in the New.
Yeah, and of course, chapter 2, Psalm 2, begins with how that the people, the nations, are taking their counsel against the Lord and against His anointed. Well, you can't separate those two things. I want God, but I don't want Christianity, is the way it's often framed in this world today. Back then is, I can like God and not like the one that He put in place as His king. And David understood this most. You remember there was a couple of times that we know of, at least, that he had the opportunity when Saul is chasing him, trying to kill him. Mm-hmm. Saul is not a good man at this point. And David has an opportunity to take him out. He already knows he's going to be the next king, that God wants him to be the next king. But his reasoning for not doing it is Saul is the anointed of the Lord. And as such, it's not my place to kick against him or to turn against him, see? So, and that's part of the thing when you study through the Psalms, they do live in a theocracy, of course, but whenever you revolt against that leader, that king that God has put in place, you're revolting against the Lord Himself. And that's why David would make lots of, and we'll look at these over the course of time, but David would make appeals to God that for God to destroy his enemies. The appeal that David was basing it on was not so much to save my hide as much as it is, Lord, to save your reputation.
Yeah.
And that's the point that he's trying to get to is, again, you can't take God and not take the ones that God. So you can preach as someone who is representing God, and I can try to stand against what you've taught, but really all I've done is I've turned against God. It's not against Garrett that I've turned against. It's God that I've turned against.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Corey, what do you think about going up and let's break down chapter 1, or I keep saying chapter, Psalm 1, and then we can look at Psalm 2 and then make some application of it now that we've kind of introduced both of these. As we look at verse 1, there's wisdom literature is about allowing us to gain wisdom from those who have lived life, from those who have learned certain things in life, and ultimately striving to learn the wisdom of God. Some of that wisdom we're able to know, some of it we're not able to know. But there is a lot of wisdom throughout, everything from Job all the way to Song of Solomon that we can gain for our life. And this right here is no different. These psalms as a whole, or these songs, are meant to help us to grow in our spiritual walk with the Lord, to gear us or to direct us toward spiritual thinking, if you will, on a number of things. So when it says in verse 1, how blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked. Well, the idea of walk, Corey, I love this word walk, and let's see, we'll just make that one purple. And if any of our keywording friends are looking at this, I'm just going off the cuff here. So every underline, we're just trying to, we're wanting to point these things out to you. But the idea of the walk is so important within the text, and it really is about the lifestyle that a person is to live. And so, all throughout Paul's writings especially, we have those phrases: walk in a manner worthy of God, walk in a manner worthy of the Lord, walk in a manner worthy of your calling. Don't walk as unwise, but walk as wise, and understand, do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is. And so this walk is so important. 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 21 talks about following in the steps or the footsteps of Jesus, or walking step by step with him. I think there's a few variations of that depending on which translation you use. But there really is the idea of the walk is like this thread concept that goes all throughout the text as we're striving to walk with God, ultimately striving to walk with Jesus. And so right off the bat, as most likely David begins this writing, he's saying that the blessed man is going to walk, but we have to consider the way that we walk, which is consider the lifestyle that you're going to take part in, which goes on to this next word, which is in the counsel of the wicked. And the counsel could be, I don't know, Corey, you probably have a couple of different variations of how we might be able to describe this. It could be the advice of others. It could be the surrounding words of other people. In Proverbs, Solomon talks a lot about the people who are surrounding you, surrounding yourself with a good crowd. Well, if we're surrounding ourselves with the wicked and we're standing, so if we're standing here, we'll just put a box around that, in the paths of sinners, or this word here, sit in the seat of scoffers. Here's what this means, is that we are being around people who are leading us in the wrong way. And that is the lifestyle that you have developed for yourself, which is not going to allow a circumstance of you to be blessed. I don't know. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, and the idea of advice is, I think, the right one, but you think of having counselors or a counsel, that's what they're doing, is giving advice. Well, who are we allowing to give us advice on how to live in our lives? The blessed man is not going to accept or follow the advice of bad counselors, of wicked counselors. Yeah. And it's a really good verse, especially you're talking about walking, which is all especially in Ephesians. You think about how many walking passages there are in Ephesians. Yeah. But our lifestyle, this is especially a good verse to use as an illustration for young people, because they've got a lot of counselors, television, their peers, social media, all sorts of things that are trying to tell them what they need to focus on and what's really important in their lives. But that's not who you need to be listening to for your advice. And I do think that there's a downward spiral that you're looking here. If you think about walking, standing, sitting, your lifestyle, what you're taking a stand on, or you're putting yourself around. It's kind of like you walk by and you look, or you're influenced by something as you go by, or then you stop and you stand and you're really paying attention, or then you sit down and you're right in the middle of it. And I think there's a regression even in the words that he's using here of, the wicked is basically just the opposite of someone who's innocent. Mm-hmm. Sinners is someone who would miss the mark. Scoffers are someone who are belittling and criticizing. So it not only is our regression getting worse and worse, but even the people that we're around. It starts with just a little bit, but there's this process. No one, the old example about if you throw a frog in a boiling pot of water, he jumps out, or if you put it in a pot and I don't know who's tormenting frogs like that. Just fry the frog legs and eat them and be done with them. But nonetheless, it's a good illustration of the fact that, nobody just jumps off the deep end into sin. It's a process, usually a slow process, but it's based off of who we're surrounding ourselves with. And that's not to say that we need to wall ourselves off from the world. We've got to have an influence on the world to be salt and light. We've got to be around them. But are we influencing them, or are they influencing us, is a big question for us to ask.
Yeah, yeah. And you talked about this regression: walk, stand, sit. But we also have boxed off, and I've just kind of been marking this in a different way. For those who are walking in the counsel of the wicked, so they're in the location of them, listening to their words. They're standing in the path of sinners. So again, they're in the location, or they're sitting in the seat of scoffers. So, Even that is a regression here. You are literally putting yourself in line, in contact with people who are, which this is a really important word here, wicked. And sinners and scoffers are really kind of a example of what this is. And in chapter 1, there's a huge contrast here, right? Of the righteous and the wicked. And so many times in wisdom literature as a whole, there's a huge contrast. Here's what it looks to be righteous. Here's what it looks like to be wicked. So in verse 1 of Psalm 1, this is kind of the definition of what it looks like not to be the blessed man. But then we come to verse 2, and now he gives a description of what the blessed man looks like. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law he meditates day and night. He will be like a tree firmly planted by streams of water, which yields its fruits in its season, and its leaf does not wither, and in whatever he does, he prospers. So let's think about these two verses quickly here. And Corey, you have described this word meditates several times. In fact, you were on with Dan Owen the other day, and you were looking at this idea of meditation. So help us to understand that word a little bit better.
Well, it literally comes from the Hebrew word that they would talk about with a cow chewing on the cud. And that's what it is. First of all, he delights in the law. What do we delight in? Go ask your preacher, what do you think about Oklahoma football this year? And they're, oh man, we've got a Heisman Trophy candidate. He's listing the three deep, on both sides of the ball. He can tell you the backup long snapper. Then ask him what you've been studying on lately. Well, what's his delight really in? See, we delight in a lot of things. Do we delight in the law of the Lord? And then not only to delight in it, but to chew on it, have time of study and listening to people teach it, but then to chew on it day and night, to be thinking about it and how does it apply in my life and those types of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love, and for anybody who doesn't know what chewing on the cud is, probably won't go too much into that, but basically a cow will go out for you folks who are not accustomed to, you like more of the eating the cow instead of the raising the cow. But, for a cow that chews on the cud, he goes and he takes in all that he can, and he goes off in a corner basically by himself or goes off in some location where they're comfortable, and then they basically just regurgitate what they've eaten, and they keep chewing on it. And for us, that's a good thing because the more they do that, the better the meat tastes in the end. So that's what it is. It is taking everything in and then basically regurgitating it and chewing on it again. And that's the idea. And here's what I have found with myself is that while the more that I study, I can say this, that I don't always do this on purpose, Corey, but I can be driving down the road, or I can be in a shower, or I can be sitting on my front porch, or I can be mowing the lawn, and things will start to pop in my head about what I've studied, what I've thought about, what it could be from a sermon, Bible class, could be something I heard on a podcast about, maybe some teaching or some text or whatever. And I just start to think about it over and over again. What are the possibilities of this? And can be a lot of reasons for that. But that's essentially what it is that you're thinking on the things that you have studied over and over again. And I'll give you a great example of this, and which is very close to me. And I actually talked about this at my grandpa's funeral, that there came a point where he's all he could think about was heaven. He said, what are the passages about heaven? And so he starts naming them off, and I'm naming them off. And I said, would you like me to read some of these passages to you? And he said, yeah. So I went and got his Bible, and I pulled a chair, and there we started to read. And what we read was something that you and I have studied over and over and over again. We've read it. We know it by heart. It's John 14. And in the very beginning, I started reading it. Of course, I could barely hold it together. But I started reading this, and I've never thought about these words in the way that I thought about them when I read them then was, do not let your heart be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. Now, I have focused so much on the results or what the impact of that statement is in regard to the next 5 verses. But to think about it from that standpoint, and I have chewed on that so much, but only for the purpose of the meaning of verse 6. But whenever I was sitting there listening, and I have chewed on this more and more, do not let your heart be troubled. What did that mean for them who were there? Well, I guarantee you at some point they started chewing on it, and that's something that Papa had chewed on for a long time. And now it was coming into action within his life. And it's a beautiful thing when you chew on or when you meditate on God's word, because then it goes into your heart instead of just simply being a word on a page. And I think that's the result.
And the how to apply it in my life, especially. And that will change over time in situations you're in, but that's the idea here. So I'm thinking about, what does that mean? Why did he say that there? Why did he say it before that? Why did he say it after that? What's the meaning of that? Why did he choose that word and not that word? But then how does it apply to my life? And what does it mean? What does he want me to do with this is a big part of that, of course, too. So that's the righteous man. He's focused on the word of God. So since it's something he delights in, he's thinking about it all week long. Yeah, I think about, like, I'm on a bunch of Instagram Tennessee Vols stuff. I'm sure you are with Oklahoma and different things. And, we win a game, and every post, they're like 3 times a day for the next 6 days, you have posts about this last game that we played. And this person got Defensive Player of the Week. And this person set a record for most receiving touchdowns in a game. And, whatever it might be. We delight in that. But do I take, when I sit down and listen to Garrett preach a sermon on Sunday morning at Hydro, the rest of the week while I'm at the grocery store or at the job or whatever, am I rolling that through every day through the week and thinking about, the different points that was made from the text or whatever? That's the idea. Because I want to learn how to grow closer to God.
Yeah. And notice in verse 3 that this is what happens when you delight in the law of the Lord and you meditate day and night, is that you'll be like a tree firmly planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in its seasons, and its leaf does not wither, and whatever he does, he prospers. And so when this happens, verse 2 and 3, when this happens, now we're able to understand what we should not do in verse 1, which I will at that point know and choose wisely and be careful of who I listen to. And I'll also choose carefully where I'm going to spend my time, which means that I'm not going to stand in the path of sinners, nor sit in the seat of scoffers, or listen to the counsel of the wicked. So all of this flows together.
Yeah, especially when you think about it, like verse 1 is what a wicked person is. A righteous person does not do this. This is the wicked. Verse 2, this is what the righteous do. Verse 3, the result of the righteous path. Verse 4 is the result of the wicked path. And when you see 3 and 4, then you understand why you make the decision in 1 and 2 that you do. And that is amplified then in verses 5 and 6. The ultimate, 3 and 4 is kind of like the here and now result of that. 5 and 6 is the ultimate result of all that.
Yeah. So the wicked are not so they're not like this, but they're like chaff, which the wind drives away. The wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the assemblies of the righteous. So this is a different location that they're even going to end up in, as they're just driven by the wind. Paul may say they're driven by all the winds of the doctrine, or in Colossians, they're driven by the philosophies of men. But then he ends up and he says, for the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish. So ultimately, this contrast of the righteous and the wicked is setting the stage for everything that we are fixing to embark on, which takes us into the second psalm, which, whether or not they are connected or not, certainly go together, because now he says, why are the nations in an uproar and the peoples devising a vain thing? Well, something that's vain is worth nothing. So something, it's something that has no meaning in it. Solomon uses this idea. It's striving after the wind. These things are vain. They mean nothing. He says, the kings of the earth take their stand and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord, against his anointed, saying, let us tear their fetters apart and cast away their cords from among us. Well, we're continuing here with this idea that they're against the Lord. Well, if they're against the Lord, Psalm 1 talks about that's the way of the wicked. And these people are meeting together. They're in a council together, which is, what we read in Psalm 1 and verse 1. That's not the way.
Again, this may be connections I'm making that the original never meant to make, but you think about, like at the start of verse 1, he talks about the wicked, sinner, and scoffer. Yes. Well, then when you get to the end of chapter 1, he's talking about the wicked are not so, the wicked will not stand, sinners will not stand in the congregation of the righteous. So you've got, here's the wicked and the sinners, and here's what happens to them. And then, but what about the scoffers? Well, the scoffers are the people that are making fun of or belittling or are totally opposed to others. That's the people that he's talking about here in chapter 2 or Psalm 2. Mm-hmm. Is they're raging or rioting, they're plotting in vain. It's literally growling a vain thing. They're whatever.
Yeah.
They're totally turned against him. So you can do all that, but you're not going to stand. If you're wicked, you're a sinner, you're not going to stand. God doesn't know you. And you can try to scoff and turn totally against him, but disobey all you want. We're going to burst the bonds. We don't want to be under the direction of the Lord. He's not going to lord over us. But guess what? You can't throw it off him being Lord. He's going to be Lord no matter what. Now, you can choose not to allow him to lord over you in this life, but it's a vain thing to think that you're not going to have to answer to him one day.
Right. So not submitting to his will, and where we're getting at in Psalm 2 is not submitting to his anointed. So in discussion of the anointed, sometimes I think there's some confusion about this, because a lot of times we're only driving to the fact that this is Jesus, that Psalm 2 is only talking about Jesus. And remember that dual understanding of things is certainly true. So while something may mean something, it can also mean another. And the anointed here, while it can be, or ultimately will be, discussing Christ, where we'll reference Hebrews chapter 1, it's also talking about the kings of this day. So if we think about it from a current context, within their culture, their day, their traditions, everything that they know, when the people would have read Psalm 2, they would have not been thinking about Jesus. And that's very important here. They would have been thinking about the current day king, which would have been Saul, David, Solomon, so on and so forth. And so that's something very important. Go ahead.
And you see that played out in Old Testament history. We can, if we lure the Israelites out of Israel, then their God is not able to, because they thought of regionalized gods, their God. So when you're making plans on how to bring down the king, the government of Israel, what he's saying is you're making plans against God himself, because that's the way they thought about things. But, you can't bring down the Lord's anointed any more than you can bring down the Lord God, because he's the one true God over all the earth, which we're reminded of repeatedly in the Psalms as well. So it's a fruitless exercise to think you can, because I think it's funny, verse 4, he who sits in heaven laughs. It's kind of like, when my 6-year-old would say, hey, you want to play one-on-one? I bet I can beat you. And you just kind of, yeah, well, that's cute, whatever. Yeah. Or even today when my sons say, you want to play college football on PlayStation, and I think I can beat you now. And I just kind of laugh and I say, that's cute. I've been I've been playing college football, video games since way before you were born. So, but anyway, God laughs because it's ridiculous to think you can overthrow him by overthrowing his anointed. And then he's going to speak in his wrath and terrify them in his fury. That's at the point that you're going, ruh-roh, Raggy. We have messed up.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, there's a lot of connections that we can make even to this concept. Romans 13 is a place that we can connect, talking about the submission to ultimately, the governing authorities, which throughout time have been different, not only in biblical times, but even now. And so, somebody who submits to the will of the Lord is going to submit to those who are above them, which includes the anointed of God. So in this case, it would be the current king that God has anointed. So this is a result of doing good. It's a result of being good. And it's very important for us to consider that concept because that is what shows the people outside of faith the blessings of being in the faith. And so whenever we look at this idea of verse 4, which is funny to me, he who sits in the heavens laughs, the Lord scoffs at them. Then we will speak to them in anger and terrify them in the fury. But as for me, notice that statement, I have installed my king upon Zion, my holy mountain. I've installed my king. You can do what you want. You can say what you want. You can think what you want. But ultimately, I am the one who knows what's right, and you don't. That's so right. When we look at even those levels of wisdom that wisdom literature speaks of, that God's wisdom is so far above ours that if we turn away from that wisdom and speak against it, God doesn't act the same way we may act when somebody turns against us and doesn't agree with us. We sit there and are like Paul, why in the world don't you agree with me? He sits back and laughs. So, this is something really important. I have installed my king, and the king is certainly in reference to the anointed, which is whom he has established there upon Zion, my holy mountain. He says, I will surely tell of the decree of the Lord. He said to me, you are my son. Today I have begotten you. Now here is where that connection to Hebrews chapter 1 begins to take place, because now in Hebrews 1 and chapter 5, he begins to talk about his anointed king and discusses that very important concept, which is this ultimately is Jesus. And so that phrase is mentioned throughout the text. We have it here. We have it, when Jesus is baptized in the Jordan River. We hear it on Mount of Transfiguration. We see it, in several places, and of course Peter even alludes to it in 2 Peter chapter 1. And so that's a very big concept to consider.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the idea that, going back to what you were saying, if I have set my the idea that you get down into verses 8 and 9, the comparison of you trying to overthrow that is like God, the Lord, his anointed, is the rod of iron. Those that are turning against him is like a potter's vessel. Mm-hmm. So if we're going to do battle and you pick up a clay pot and I pick up a crowbar, I'm feeling pretty good about my chances. Your clay pot's not going to last very long in opposition to my crowbar, and that's the idea here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Notice he says in verse
11. So
because
of that, ultimately, instead of being disobedient, which is the way he started off Psalm 2 with, in verses 1 through 3, instead of being disobedient, then if you know who's going to win, if you know he's Lord, if you know his anointed has the Lord behind him, what should you do? Well, what you should do is you should obey him, and you should worship him, and you should fear him. Yeah. And, all of those things. That's what the righteous is going to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Then he says in verse 11, worship the Lord with reverence and rejoice with trembling, which is pretty interesting. rejoice with trembling. Do homage to the Son. So notice this, we have in verse 12, the Son. In verse 7, we have my Son. And of course, we connect that up here to, in verse 2, the anointed, because the anointed is my Son, and he is the Son. That's who he's in discussion of. I don't think I missed any there. So do homage to the Son, that he not become angry. Why? Because he is my king, and you perish in the way, for his wrath may soon be kindled. How blessed are those who take refuge in him. So, Corey, who is it that we're to take refuge? Are we taking refuge in God? Or are we taking refuge in the anointed?
Yes.
There you go. That's which, contextually, definitely, probably we could say it is the Son, but at the same time, it is God. I don't know how you can separate those two things.
Right. And that in their day, that is, you follow the Lord's anointed, the King David, that as long as you're not, you think about those like Saul or those like Absalom that try to take their will in their own hands, it didn't turn out well for them by going against the Lord's anointed. But those that took refuge in him, those that followed him and whatnot, they were fine. Same thing now is true with us with Jesus. You can kick against him all you want, but it's not going to turn out well for you. Right. You take your the opposite stance and follow him and serve it. And ultimately, you're talking about New Testament connections we make. Well, Philippians chapter 2 tells us, at the name of Jesus, every tongue will confess, every knee will bow. He's Lord, period.
Yeah.
Dave Chamberlain used to say it this way. He would pause and drop his voice. The will of God, is going to be accomplished. The only question is, are you going to stand with him, or are you going to try to stand against him? And if you try to stand against him, it's a vain thing. It's a foolish thing. It's a fruitless thing, because he's going to be Lord. One day, whether you do it willingly in this life or you're made to do it after this life is over, you're going to realize that Jesus is the Lord, and you need to confess that to be the case and recognize that. But it'll be too late if we wait till then.
Yeah. Yeah. There's never been a time where it has worked out for someone to be against God.
No.
Never been a time where that's worked out in somebody's favor, if you will. Blessings are only found in and with God, and those who will follow and submit to him in every way will be the blessed man. And that really is, I think, the message that we start out with. Those who will look to his word and think on those, meditate on that day and night, that really is leading a person into understanding his words in a way that is more than, I don't know, maybe this won't sound right, more than just educational. I don't know if that makes sense. More than just knowing what it says, but now I'm striving to know what it means, and how I can apply that to my life, and how I can encourage others with that, and truly live for God in a wonderful way. So I'm internalizing all of this stuff in my life, in my heart, my soul, my mind, and that's how I'm to love God. And so that is a way that we can show love to God and for God, is by doing that. And when we submit to his will, that means that we're submitting to his anointed Son, his King, throughout time, whoever that may have been. Of course, now is Christ. And that's a message that a lot of people really need to understand, that his will overrides yours. And there's never a time that that's not true. So we have to be very careful about that. Yep. So any closing thoughts or comments? I've really enjoyed this discussion, this look at both of these Psalms, especially with you, because you love the Psalms. you're a big wisdom literature guy, and I really enjoy hearing your thoughts on these, and because they really do help us in everyday life. And what a wonderful way to start out this, what we would call a book, but this first book of 5 we call the Psalms.
Yeah, and one more little tidbit that maybe will whet your appetite for more to come. Back up in chapter 1, Psalm 1, the righteous man is planted by streams of water. Almost every English translation has something of that nature, streams of water. That word, if you click on streams, you'll find that it means an irrigation ditch or a canal, the word in the original language. And so the idea is, well, if I could fall from the tree and wind up near something that was profitable to me, that would be great. But that's not the case. It's not a stream that's naturally there. It's an irrigation ditch or a canal. And both of those, if you're going to have an irrigation ditch or a canal, that means that's going to require a little digging. That's the way it's going to have to be for us. If we're going to be firmly planted by streams of water, it's not going to just naturally come to us. We're not going to learn by osmosis. We're going to have to do some digging. And so that's really the Hebrew word behind that, we're going to do the digging, and we're going to make sure that we get it. And that's what we're going to try to do throughout the rest of the series, is dig into these Psalms and see how that we can not be tossed to and fro, but are driven away by the wind of the things that happens in this world. But how can we be firmly planted in the Lord and His truth, growing in our relationship with Him, bearing fruit for Him? Mm-hmm. It starts by doing some digging, and that's what we're going to do throughout this season.
Yeah. Person who does that, and its leaf does not wither. From the tree, its leaf does not wither. Withering leaves are ultimately, most of the time, at least in my understanding, are a result of some type of internal disease that causes the rot to begin, which causes the leaf to wither. And so, I don't know, again, like maybe I'm making a connection I shouldn't be making here, but I can't help but think of the fig tree when Jesus walks over the hill and he sees Jerusalem, he sees the temple, and he's got that fig tree, and he curses it. Whenever they come back, that tree is now rotting. It's withering, but it's withering from the roots up. It hasn't it hasn't done any work to bear any fruit, and so maybe it's a connection I shouldn't make here. But I can't help but think about that story whenever I read these 2 lines, which yields its fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither, and in whatever he does, he prospers. Well, why does a blessed man prosper? He prospers because he's doing things that are good. He's doing things that are in the counsel of God rather than in the counsel of wicked. He's doing things that are delightful to the Lord. He's doing things that are good in His eyes, ultimately following His will, and so he prospers. Now, I don't know that means that he prospers in all ways of his life, because there's been a lot of faithful people who didn't have a whole lot. A lot of faithful people who their life by worldly standards really were not good. But the prospering is a spiritual prospering, a result of faith that he's ultimately doing all that God asked. And in the end, especially whether his life was good or not good, in the end, he will prosper as a result of the faith that he has, because he is delighted in the Lord and, set his heart. Basically, like Ezra, set his heart to study and to practice and teach, to connect those, Ezra 7 and verse 10. But that's where I think that the prospering ultimately leads.
Yes.
So, which
it's probably time to land the plane, but they would have thought of it as longevity of life and shoes that don't wear out and those kind of things. But none of those things are promised to those of us who live on this side of the cross. So as Christians, we look at it totally different. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus promises clothing, food, and whatnot, but those are necessities, not prospering. But we flourish and prosper in our spiritual walk with God. So, again, we have to remember the genre that we are interpreting is Hebrew poetry, and ultimately our prosperity is way beyond just the things of this life, for sure.
Yep. Well, Corey, I've enjoyed this study, and I think that to a degree we have been meditating on and chewing on all of this, and talking about all the different things that we can connect this to, and hopefully this will lead you who are listening or tuning in to do the same. Find somebody in your life that you can chew on these things with, you can talk about these things with, and grow as a result of the things that you're studying and reading, and consider the concepts, the possibilities as you look at these, so that you can internalize the teachings of God, especially here in the Psalms as we look at them. And so, Corey, this has been great. I'm so thankful for our time together, and we're thankful for you who are listening and tuning in or viewing us. We're glad to be back in the saddle, if you will, and to jump back in these studies. And I'm looking forward to our next studies that we are going to be doing in the coming weeks. Next week is going to be a big one that we look at. And I thought that I had my paper here to see which one we were doing, but we'll post what psalm we're going to be in next week. But until then, we hope that you will be going back through these, reading them, studying them, contemplating all that they have to say and what they mean in your life, and hopefully they will bless you in a wonderful way as you walk with the Lord. And so until next time, we hope that the Lord will continue to bless you. We pray that you'll be back with us next Thursday at noon is when the next episode will drop, and we look forward to seeing you then. So until then, like, share, follow, subscribe, all those good things. Help us to grow the podcast as we move forward. And until next time, stay untied.